Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. I am so glad you could join us today as we were talking about WB's latest drama, Air, starring Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. And as one of the more recent examples of a sports movie, I got two of my sports experts and dear friends of mine.
Oh, hey, hold on now.
Huh.
I don't know if we're experts. I
Hey,
don't know
let
if
him.
I'm an expert. How about that?
Hey, let him cook. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Yeah. We'll
Two of
take
the
it.
greatest sports minds that have never been signed
That's
by
right.
an NBA franchise.
Absolutely.
It sounds like we should start a podcast, John.
Paul Levac and Jehan, welcome, gents. I'm glad we could talk.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Anytime. For those of you who are unaware, Air tells the true story of Sonny Vaccaro and Nike as they pursue basketball rookie Michael Jordan, creating a partnership that revolutionizes the world of sports and contemporary culture. As always, this podcast is rated S for spoilers. But gentlemen,
Oh,
what do you
sweet.
think of the air up there? Well, not the air up there. That's another film.
I was going to say, I saw that movie in the 90s. It's not probably the one we're
forget
reviewing,
what that was
although both
about.
basketball movies.
I think that was a basketball film.
It was.
Wasn't it?
Yep. It's the origins of Dikembe Mutombo or something.
That was, yes.
Oh, interesting. I don't think I
It
saw
actually
that.
wasn't. I don't quote me on that.
Oh, okay.
What did you think?
Honestly, I thought it was pretty good overall. Like it was. I think it was. I don't know. I guess my expectations were pretty neutral going in. Like I was familiar with the story. And then. But it was just a really tight movie, I thought. Like in the sense of like I mean Affleck yeah, he's a good director, right? Like it's at this point in time he's proven himself in a sense. And so it was nice seeing, like it'd been a while since I'd just seen a good, well put together movie. And that was kind of like what I came out of it feeling like. Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, I found it was, when Ben Affleck and Matt Damon get together, it's typically good stuff that happens for the most part. I mean, I can't think of a bad movie off the top of my head they made really yet. I did just
many have
watch
they
Good Will
made
Hunting
together?
a couple weeks ago. Huh?
How many have they made together? Three?
A bunch.
Like officially though, movies, like not just ones they've cameoed in. Like I know that they've done that
Well,
with like
So you got Good Will Hunting, this one. That's all I got.
there was
like,
no
come
there was that
on,
one they just
mind,
did.
don't
Yes,
fail me.
yes. Try to
There was
stall
that
it.
one
I
they
don't
just
think
did
there's
with
that many. Yeah.
with Adam Driver. There was one they just did with Adam Driver.
But this is kind of more recent thing though, right? Like they got like is it a studio, not studio, like production company? Like they're doing more stuff together now intentionally,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay. The internet hasn't failed me. They've done 9 movies together.
Yeah, but like together, or like they were in, like this. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
they
like
were uncredited. If you want to go that far, go back to sports movies. This wasn't the first sports movie they were in together.
what was the other one?
They were uncredited extras in Field of Dreams.
See, now I don't
Bit of a-
count this stuff. Like
It's a bit of a
this is
stretch.
that's like
It
filming
is,
and going
yeah.
out to lunch together. Like I mean,
Steve, what were your thoughts?
no, I like what you said there, Jahan. I'll be honest because I think it is just a tight little film. Affleck has really come into his own as a director, and I used to hate him as an actor.
Hmm.
Like I was say I think I don't know whether I said this to Paul or not after the film, but Affleck was the guy that they were trying to make cool,
Mm.
and Damon was the guy who was.
Mhm.
Like in the earlier days, in the late '90s, early aughts, right? Like
Right.
Damon's doing Bourne stuff, and it seems like everything Damon's doing is like a hit. And Affleck is doing Daredevil and the oh the what
Gili.
was it? Sheely. He did do Sheely. No, but there was that's the one where he made him Jack Ryan. He was Jack Ryan,
Right.
and it just wasn't like. But when he stepped behind the camera, I think it was Gone Baby Gone.
Hmm.
Everything seemed to click.
And then The Accountant as well.
Did
I don't
he
know if that was
direct,
the one you're referring to or not.
did he direct The Accountant?
No, he was in The Accountant. Like he was the accountant. I don't know if that was the reference you're looking for.
No. I was thinking of no. It was the one where he was Jack Ryan because I remember it was right
Mm,
after Harrison Ford, and then they brought in Ben Affleck because they wanted to go with a younger Jack
Mhm.
Ryan. I think I forget what it was called. No, Clear and Present Danger was still Harrison Ford, but it was that
yeah.
forgettable. I was like, this is not entertaining. But Affleck now seems much more comfortable than I've seen him.
Yeah, like I think an example like just right from the start, like with I don't know if it's Vaccaro or Vaccaro, but with the like Matt Damon, the main character, like those opening like there's just opening couple shots where he's in Vegas and then he like lays down um like the bets. Like it was just a couple scenes and there wasn't much like dialogue, but it like it was very economical, but immediately you sort of, okay, this character, like he's kind of a gambler and he hits, but he also loses, and he's like maybe he's a bit impulsive, and then you find out, okay, he stops there on his like on his trips, he kind of routes through Vegas. So like in just like a few short scenes, you kind of get this vibe of who this person is, and it kind of and then you see that carry through obviously in the movie where he's like both diligent, but he's also kind of impulsive, and he's also like intense, and
Mm,
so in that sense, whereas it's like I don't know, sometimes yeah, like movies, it'll be like an extra, they'll be 20 minutes longer because there'll be like all these scenes uh to just beat the audience over the head that this character is like this. Whereas I don't know, maybe to your point, like he's comfortable, like Affleck as a director, so he sort of trusts the audience to notice these things and kind of put two and two together, and then go along on the journey with him in a sense, right?
But, though, even on screen, like with him playing Phil Knight here, I didn't feel like he was trying to force anything. Like in the last few years when I've seen him on screen, I didn't feel like he was trying to force anything in particular.
mm.
He was just doing his thing, and it's
Mhm.
working. Like I'm watching and I'm like I'm really enjoying him in this. The one thing I would say about this film is it is really obsessed with the 80s. There are so
But that
many
was that
80s
was fun
montages.
though.
Yeah.
That was kind of fun though, I thought, right? Like I don't know, it was that it put you right in that mind frame. I don't know, it was like in that, like I enjoyed that. Like it was like I don't know, you sort of felt embodied in that era a little bit, with all the references and all the over the top, like all the music, the style, everything. Like I said, I took you along on that journey.
It maybe just bothered me that I remembered everything that was in the
Oh.
montage.
That's great. I think thankfully Jahan and I are a little on the younger side of that for the
That's
80s at
right.
least. So I thankfully I didn't have to remember enough of that. But I felt Affleck was playing a lot of himself in the movie. I don't think he played Phil Knight. I think this is Affleck basically playing himself with a little bit of yoga, as how I would put it. Right? Like he was very, I'm just going to play myself. I'm going to be a little bit more eccentric, and I run now, right? And that's, but no, really, like that's how I perceived it. Really,
It
like
got,
go ahead.
oh no, go, no, fish your thought. Yeah.
That's basically where I'm at. That's why I was glad you jumped in.
Oh, I was just kind of curious if because I've heard Phil Knight is and I've never read is it Shoe Dog, or his memoir is
Mm.
supposed to be really really good read, but I've heard, like, isn't he supposed to be kind of eccentric a little bit like that, like Phil Knight? Like I'm not sure, I'm not sure how much was embellished or not in that regard, but yeah, I think there's some of that was not just like, I think some of that was, I think, like staying true to who Phil Knight's supposed to be, or is, I guess he's still alive. But,
I wouldn't be surprised. It still felt like it was Affleck playing Affleck with a little bit of Phil Knight just kind of sprinkled in there, where Matt Damon's character felt like he was playing Vicario, if that makes any sense. Like it wasn't. I didn't see much of Matt Damon in that role, and that's a good thing. I think he kind of embodied the individual that he needed to embody at the time. Whereas again, I think Chris Tucker was playing Chris Tucker in the suit of an executive. You know what I mean? Like it was a lot of Chris Tuckerisms in the movie as well. I found, but maybe you just can't get away from that with Chris Tucker in general. I don't know. I just keep seeing Friday every time I see Chris Tucker, anyways.
well, Damon, I feel like the only thing as Vicar, because like Vicaro is like notorious, it was like super like just kind of schlubby kind of guy,
Mm,
and
yeah.
they did sort of try and have some scenes that show like that, but in the end there's only so much you can cover up as far as like it's a Hollywood A-lister or whatever, right? So it's like so in that sense, uh yeah, I mean, but then to your point, like he's still like the care like the Damon did a great job as a Vaccaro,
Yeah.
at least from what you read about the guy.
If he's not too old, I mean, I think it would have been a great cast to get Wayne Elliott Knight, the guy who played Newman from Seinfeld, for that role.
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly like the vibe that
Yeah.
Vaccaro is supposed to have been like back then. Yeah.
Or you want to go newer, you get like a Zach Galifianakis type, right? I thought would have been a really
Oh,
good
I
fit
don't know.
too.
I don't know if Galifianakis could have. I mean,
Done
maybe.
such
But
a
I think it would have
such
been
a
more
serious
comedic.
role. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be an interesting experiment.
I'd like to know how far this goes, though, Paul. Are you saying that just like Ben Affleck in real life, Matt Damon is doing all the work and he's just sitting there?
I'm not going to go that far to state that specifically, but
He may be watching. That's
well, yeah. I mean, it's possible. Not going to take that out of the realm of possibility.
that's I'm sure that Matt Damon likes to kick back with Fish Radio on his TV.
When you say stuff like that, I think back to the Kevin Garnett quote when he won the championship of "Anything's possible," but he screamed it a lot more enthusiastically.
One of the things you mentioned, Chris Tucker. One of the things I did hear is that, of course, they went to Jordan to get his input, and the only thing, to my understanding, that he insisted on, he said, you guys have done a great job. This is pretty much how it played out. Is they wanted him to include Tucker's character. Forgive me, I can't think of his name.
Howard White.
Howard White. That's what he said. He said the only thing I want is for you to have Howard White included in the film.
And he wanted Viola Davis to play his mom.
Right.
Yeah, he requested her. Yeah.
Which, I'm a fan of Viola Davis. I think she will do and play whatever she wants to play whenever she wants and do phenomenal at it. So, I don't know. I didn't know Jordan's mom specifically, but she felt pretty bang on.
How much power do you have when you say, I want
casually.
Viola Davis to play my mother?
It feels like one of those things like, yeah, where you're, I don't know, just like you're spitballing with friends. You're like, oh yeah, like this person for this person, except you're Michael Jordan, so you can get Viola Davis. You can request to Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, unlike Viola Davis, so that they can get Viola Davis as to play your mother. Yeah.
But like to flip it from an actor's perspective, like if you get asked into this film to play this role, and you know that you're specifically requested by Michael Jordan, can you actually turn that down? I mean, sure, your career will go on, but
I mean,
I
Davis could.
I think
she's doing all right.
Yeah. If anybody could have.
Yeah, I think she's doing all right.
I think any actor or actress could turn it down, but I don't think you would turn it down. I don't know. In 20 years, when we do one of these about LeBron, I don't think someone's going to turn the film down either.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys about something. I saw an article earlier today. I forgot to put it in our chat earlier, but I just thought it was really interesting. The article was arguing that the new movie stars, the new film topics, aren't people but brands. And they cited this film, and they talked about Tetris specifically. And there was another one they listed as well.
Mario Brothers?
Yeah, but Mario Brothers, though, is different because that was just Mario. That was a movie about Mario. These are movies about how brands came to be. Like Tetris is this movie about video games. That's what it is. It's structurally not that different.
I guess you could go back to the Ford versus Ferrari, the Founder, movies like that. Is what kind of you're looking at?
Founder is a good example. Yes.
Yeah.
Social Network, I guess.
The Lego movies, technically.
I don't know if that's the same thing. I think
it's all Lego all day.
But it's not about like the history of how Lego was made or came.
But it still
right?
hammers
the point home for branding, I think.
Well, I think that's. But I mean, Disney, for example, any Disney film is hammering the brand down. But
it's a story about Walt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the one where Tom Hanks is playing Walt Disney,
Right.
maybe the Mary Poppins film.
Okay.
Um, I just found that an interesting concept because I was watching this film and I was engaged at it, but it never occurred to me that I was just watching a film about a brand.
Hmm.
Like, this wasn't the story of Michael Jordan or the grand things that he did. It was, how did this business do this thing?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's new.
Hmm.
I think it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see if it has legs beyond some of these iconic brands, right? I mean, like, because a lot of times like, you do see there'll be a good idea of something, and then it just gets like beaten down into the ground. So
Hmm.
we'll see if there's like eventually get movies of like, I don't know, just some like just random brand like the creation of that brand. Whereas
Yeah.
like with I guess with Jordan specifically, it's this like unique marriage with like Nike. It elevated Nike because I mean for most of us growing up, Nike's like was already like this dominant brand. So seeing them in this place where they're, especially in NBA, like they're so associated with basketball now, and where they're like, but at the time it was like what, third place or something. They're this running shoe, and then at the same time too, like the NBA, like it was just this perfect blend of like the the most unique, you know, uh, like greatest ever basketball player coming in at the right time that the NBA is going live from like tape delay games, and then also this marriage of personal branding too, right? So, and then yeah, so I guess I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think like these like a story about something like Jordan or say founder of McDonald's, like, these are some of the most iconic brands, and so the stories of their origins uh are of interest to people. But it'll be interesting to see if like, this trend continues until it's watered down into stories where it's like, all right, why are you talking about the story of the creation of, New Balance or
Snapchat.
something
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like no
Yeah.
offense to New Balance.
I think it really depends. If they keep picking iconic brands to do these on, I think it'll be fine. It's like you said, once you get into the New Balances of the world, I'm going to start getting concerned. Like, while you can do a McDonald's like history movie, I don't want to hear the history of Subway or BK or whatever,
I mean,
right?
with Jordan in particular, it's interesting that like, I mean, now it's been what, 30, no, 25 years. Well, 20 years since like I was Wizards era, right? 25 years since like um the Bulls run. And so Jordan the player, a lot of for a younger generation, they grew up like, LeBron or Steph or what have you. But then because Jordan Brand is so iconic, it's still like an interesting, it's still like an interesting story. So I'd be interested like it I'm curious. I mean, this was sort of in our wheelhouse, you could argue, right? In a lot of
Mhm.
ways, like um interest in sports, like that era, like all those, like, knowing Jordan, all that stuff. Not knowing Jordan personally, but he didn't ask me to be in the movie or anything, but anything request.
He
But
asked us. Did he
yeah,
ask you?
yeah, yeah. No, but must have got spam, must have been spam. But it's an interesting thought of like, I don't know the demographics of what the viewership's been so far, or if they track that kind of thing. But if you're a younger person watching the movie, you're probably more familiar with like Jordan's the brand, and like if you're a
Mhm.
sneakerhead or whatever the case may be, then maybe like all of his exploits, and like other than like, okay, he was a great basketball player, but not the extent to which people are like, oh, like revere
Yeah.
Jordan, right?
It's crazy to me to see the landscape of the NBA and how something like this changes kind of how the shoe deals happen nowadays too, right? Because like it kind of floored me in the movie watching when they went back to the commercials and like Converse has Magic, Larry, and there was a third player, maybe Isaiah, I think was in there too. I'm not sure, but like to have a stranglehold on those three brands isn't relevant. Like it doesn't happen today. It doesn't. Like Steph's Under Armour, LeBron's I believe is Nike. Uh, I don't even know who Jokic has, and I'm not sure even who Luca has. But like
I
it's
think
just
Luka might be Jordan actually.
it's possible.
Yeah.
It's easy to look up, but just like it floors me to see that one brand would have such a stranglehold on the league's top stars at the time. and this kind of elevated Jordan as such a not the brand deal or the shoe. I think his play elevated him, but like to see the landscape change after the deal is huge. I think is what's probably gonna be known for more so than anything else.
I mean, to this day too, right? I mean, that's really how he got the money to then become an owner and everything, is
Yeah.
through these royalties. Just to kind of touch on, but
It's so interesting because, like, what you're talking about here, you're talking about the legacy of Jordan. Again, like you said, like, he really did define, he still arguably defines the NBA. Maybe not so much now because we're on the tail end of the LeBron era and all this stuff. But like with like Jordan himself, I mean, man, what a ride that was during those years. Like, I remember him, 3 straight championships. He was never going to be beaten, right? And then there were some rumors about his gambling debts, and suddenly he's retiring and taking on baseball. Then he's back for 3 more for championships, and he's a player owner, the first player owner of any sport.
Yeah.
And we're telling a story about the shoe.
To give you an idea, while I was curious, I just looked it up online real quick about current shoe deals because I wanted to see monetary value what we're looking at, right? So currently, Jordan is still the highest earner from an NBA player from a shoe deal every year right now at $150 million a year from Jordan
Currently,
Brand alone. Currently, the next one's LeBron James at 32 mil from Nike.
wow. Like,
Yeah,
think about that. He hasn't played in like 20 years.
well, that's the thing. Like Jordan Brand's transcended, right? It's just like it's in culture.
yeah.
As just like its own behemoth, even though it's technically under Nike, but
Yeah, I'd argue it's the first basketball brand to branch into other sports. Like, because it's got a whole golf line now,
That is
right? I'm
really.
waiting for Jordan Brand baseball stuff to come out, to be quite honest. I'm surprised it hasn't yet.
That does surprise me. They went to golf instead of baseball first.
Golf's you can sell a $200 shoe easily to golfers. It's a little harder on baseball.
So one thing I liked in the movie was, like, speaking of Jordan, like Jordan himself, was like how they used or didn't use, in a sense, like the actual Jordan, like in terms of like having some, because you're seeing all these like star, and I because I hadn't really looked into it going into it in terms of, oh, who's going to play Jordan, and you're seeing all these like stars, like just this massive star power in this movie. You're kind of like, oh, like who's going to be Jordan, and then oh, you said spoilers are allowed. Like,
Yeah, go ahead.
so like they sort of tease him a bit, and it kind of it reminded me a bit of, you know, with Jaws, and from my understanding, is like with Spielberg, it was you don't really see the shark right until like
Mm.
until the very end, and it was apparently like it was just like a business, like a financial decision, because it's like really expensive, and he's just getting started. But it had the impact though of like it ended up being like scarier, just the thought of it, just the idea of it. And in this case, obviously, it wasn't a scary thing, but it's like because, like, I mean, we spent this last hour portion talking about just Jordan and Jordan Brand or whatever, and it's so everybody knows the story, and it's so iconic that they didn't even have to have like, oh, like here's this young actor who's playing Michael Jordan, and then you're taken away from, you're like, oh, is this person like Jordan? Instead, just the like, oh, just the little look of the back of him, and just that shadow, you fill in the rest, because you're like,
Mm.
oh, this is young Jordan, oh, this is oh, before he's about to. And then instead you're focused on these other characters, and meanwhile this sort of almost like immortal type of figure is there. And so I kind of I like to I mean, I must have been intentional, right? But I like that they almost showed Jordan more by showing him less, in a sense.
Right. Well, by taking it from another angle, right? Like the characters in the movie are looking at him as this upstart kid from college. He hasn't done anything yet. He hasn't proved himself. But the audience in the context is like, well, we know what he's done. We know what he's proven. We know his track record. We know what he's going to do, right? So I think it lends more to what you're saying with the narrative of you don't have to show him. You just have
Well,
to show
even
an image of him.
even coming into the NBA, though, he was somewhat known because I mean he'd
Mhm.
won that championship with North Carolina. Like he'd hit that game winning shot, and he was coming off. He'd won the '84 Olympic gold. So he did have some hype coming in. Of course, nobody thought it. I mean, even they allude to it in the movie where Nike didn't think they'd have a shot at him because he's just like, I mean, he was an Adidas guy. Um, and then just the cost as well, right? But yeah, it was like I thought that was neat. And then obviously then there's this speech by so so like the climax of the movie with the speech by Vaccaro's character to kind of pitch. That's so to me, what I liked about that was like, I mean, you're watching a movie and it's like, and then to the point earlier where it's like not only is it a movie, it's a movie essentially about a brand, right? So which is already, it's marketing, and then movies can tend to embellish on on a real story, on a whatever the real story is. So you kind of have this like layered embellishments, right? But what I liked about it was like, to me that was like the right dose of embellishment. I know that wasn't the exact speech, right? Who knows if there was even like a speech given by Vaccaro, but it was like, I don't know, as it like watching in the audience, I'm like, yeah, like this is because again, watching the movie, you already know the outcome. So what do you do when you're watching this? You're telling a story, but everybody already knows the outcome. Like, how do you still make it kind of captivating? And so it's leading to this climax scene because you're like, well, there's got to be something that then converts them over, and yeah, it was like, I mean, I don't know, I just enjoyed that speech even though it was it was probably fake. It was just like, yeah, take us on this journey, Matt Damon. Like,
It was that
what,
snappy video. The snappy
yeah.
video they showed with the music.
That's
That's
right.
what that's
Yeah,
what changed the film.
yeah, yeah,
I love that you're bringing that up. First of all, the speech is great. It's so good that they talk about how great it is,
yeah.
uh,
That's right. Yeah,
which is a weird moment. It's like, wow,
yeah.
that was really good. That was good. And I sat there. I'm like, as an audience member, are you actually congratulating? But anyway, it was sort of weird. But I think you're onto something though. This idea of them not showing him, I think, is interesting. The other thing is, other than Phil Knight, none of those characters are people that the general public would even know.
Hmm.
So it's easier to show them. But I think, Paul, I think you're right. Everybody knows Michael Jordan, and they know his
Yeah.
face and they know his image. But it also elevates him somehow. Like, he's got mythic status in this film before he, as they say, put sets foot on an NBA court. Like, he was
Hmm.
known, but not to the world, to people. And again, he go like third in the draft, so it's not like he
Hmm.
was an upstart rookie that nobody knew about. But he wasn't an icon. But now he is. So it's an interesting decision to hide his face. It made me wonder. I was like, to me, I was watching that. I'm like, this is how much do we talk about elevating our sports heroes? They've given him such iconic status that they're not even going to show you what he looks like. They
Hmm.
don't need they don't need to bring in Kelvin Harrison Jr. or some other actor who's some other. You All we care about is the again brand. It's back to the brand. The
Yeah.
Michael Jordan brand is bigger than the man almost.
Hmm.
Well, we saw more game footage than anything else, right?
We did.
And that's ultimately where his brand was built and forged. Technically, you didn't need. IMDb tells me it's Damian Delano Young who played him. Sorry, Damian, I don't know who you are. Never heard of you, but that's okay. I think it worked in this film, right?
I liked the scene where they kind of show like Vaccaro just sort of obsessively watching the replay of that championship winning shot
Yeah.
until he sort of, because like again, like you're trying to communicate to the audience, okay, like this guy, this sort of maverick person, but he gets these like intuitions, and then by the same time intuitions, it's just in a way it's sort of hard to show other than like, oh, eureka or something. And so by showing them just like obsessively rewinding, and then he has a scene where he sort of explains like, okay, I watched it, like it was specifically for him, he was calm, like it sort of it communicates a bit to like, okay, like how did he, I mean, in reality it's like he, this guy had an intuition, and he spent all this time like watching, and he sort of he had this feeling, and he rode with that feeling. But it gives you a bit of a sense of like, okay, like what is he actually picking up on? Like what is it actually noticing to then bet so big, everything, bet bet the whole basketball division like on this guy, right?
Well, there was no basketball division. I mean, there
Hmm.
was, but it was just, it was so, based on what the film says, it was just so casually used, to have a 250 million is like one NBA contract now.
Two hundred
Um,
fifty thousand.
250,000. Oh my word. Okay, so there you
Yeah,
go. That's nothing. That's
yeah.
nothing. Blip on the radar. Even for them then, that was nothing. What does Phil Knight say, that they're known for running, not for, like, that's what they were running shoes. They own
Hmm.
like 70% of the running shoe market, but um, yeah, yeah. Well, you know what I thought was interesting too. There's a scene where Viola Davis lists everything he did at the end. My son is going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this. And I thought, man, I know that hindsight's 2020, and I know probably his mother had huge confidence in him, but they still took a huge risk. Like, they took a huge risk doing this, because maybe he doesn't do that thing. Maybe, like, I think they say, maybe he blows out his knee in the first 10 games on the court, right? Like, it's astounding what Jordan did, but it's really interesting to me that they list everything, because I don't know. It's like, did the brand make Jordan? Did Jordan make the brand? What was the relationship between the two? Because if he doesn't play that way, it means so much less.
Yeah, it's an interesting hypothetical, right? Let's say I mean, he did want to sign with. It was well known, like he did want to sign with Adidas, like he was an Adidas guy. Let's say they don't blow it, or Vaccaro doesn't, convince everybody, like, "Oh, let's go all in and let's do the custom shoe." It's like he would have still been MJ, right? He would still explode most likely. I mean, he would have, explode out of the gates, all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of, it's an interesting point. I mean, it's a little bit like, like the Patriots say like Belichick or Brady, and it was always like, okay, like you're the greatest quarterback ever, but you're also the greatest coach ever. But then who is like, like to your point, like I kind of feel like I feel like it's still Jordan. Like this, the play, because the excellence on the court is ultimately what elevated. It was also like the style and it was cool, and like the dunks and everything like that. But like I think I'm not discounting the fact that Nike doing the custom shoe and everything from a business perspective. I think that ended up becoming a revolutionary thing, and we're maybe still seeing the impact now with NBA and NBA in particular, where it's like such a star-driven sport. Um, but in terms of that question, I think the player, I think the player would have succeeded no matter what. And then it's just so and then, but then what shaped out to look like from a business perspective, I think may have been different, right? Because let's say he's with Adidas and okay, he got his red car, but he but he doesn't get a percent of the profits. Then his trajectory looks different financially as well, right? So but I think it comes back to that play, because ultimately in sports, like it's the excellence, it's the championships, it's all those factors. I mean, because we saw, I mean, hey, we're in Toronto, like we saw a guy like Vince Carter, like he had all the like the charisma and the high flying and athleticism and everything, but he didn't translate to like the excellence in terms of the success, and then his stars kind of faded in a sense, right? Versus say like Kobe, who did have the championships alongside everything else, and he was the maybe closest thing that we got to MJ since MJ.
Yeah, that evasive clutch gene was a little missing on VC at times.
Hmm.
But I'm from my perspective, honestly, it's like you said, Jordan would have been great regardless. People might be playing in shell-toe Jordans nowadays if the Adidas deal went through, right? As awkward as that sounds, but because it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth just talking about it. But Because it just doesn't. It'd be so far from reality that it just seems strange and odd. Um, I feel that it's a very symbiotic relationship in the sense that um, Jordan doesn't. They made the brand for him, so you can't really say the brand did anything for him in that regard. I think he would have been a great basketball player regardless. I think the relationship elevated him to a different status among the everyman or the normal non-basketball player, right? I think the deal with Nike helped expand the NBA and the
Mhm.
Jordan brand more so than Jordan's playing did. Jordan's playing was the driving factor, but I think the deal with Nike expanded it that much further.
Well, what does Sonny say? A shoe is just a shoe until someone steps in it, which I don't know whether is a very simple phrase or profound one. I'm not. I think
It's a
I'm
little bit
not
of both.
sure. A little both.
Yeah,
It's an interesting statement. It's like, well, it's just a shoe, but the person makes the shoe. But the shoe makes. They want the shoe to make the. It is. It was an interesting relationship between the two. I think you're right.
yeah. My favorite character by far in this movie was Peter Moore, or
The
the guy
shoe
that
guy?
played Peter Moore, the shoe guy.
Yeah,
Awesome,
yeah, that's great. Yeah.
absolutely awesome. I was reading up on it a little bit more. Do you know? Apparently, a little bit after the Jordan stuff went down in the late '90s, he left and went and joined Adidas.
Hmm,
The,
interesting.
really? Oh, the guy
Yeah,
behind it. No way.
yeah. He was the Adidas. He ended up being Adidas' CEO for a little while.
Huh.
Yeah,
I know Vaccaro ended up having like a falling out with like Phil Knight, and I think he ended up at Adidas too, if I'm
he
not
did,
mistaken. Because he
and then he
was
was
like,
also at Reebok.
yeah, and I think he was pretty crucial in like he signing like Adidas signed Kobe out of high school, and like I'm pretty sure he was involved in that as well. So he wasn't just a one trick kind of had a knack, I suppose.
That'll
Yeah,
be
his the high school All Star game is what did it, I think.
Yeah.
well. Okay, so that is actually a good point. And one of the things I wanted to talk about as well. There was another quote in the film that I thought was interesting, and it's just that they say that you are remembered for the rules you break. This is we see in a lot of films like this, again, brand films, which is very interesting to me because the hero is the businessman, but that's another story. Um, I just wondered what you thought of it. Yeah, to be remembered, do you have to break the rules? Is that what makes you memorable?
I think to stand out in a certain extent, and depending on the rules you break, obviously, if you're how do I put this? If you're infamous, right, for doing let's say not exactly legal things, you'll be famous for a very short time, right? I find if you start translating and pushing the boundaries of what you do best, whether that's sports, whether that's in the world of business, whether that's whatever you do, that's where you truly begin to be remembered. I think of someone's going to hate me for this reference, but the Elon Musk's, the Steve Jobs of the world. Like I'm trying to stay away from sports for a particular reason because they push the boundaries of what was acceptable in their realms and what their companies could achieve, and they'll be remembered for that. Right? I don't think it's more of breaking rules. The rules, I think, was not necessarily the best term in that phrase. I think it would be more pushing boundaries and not limiting yourself. Is how I would phrase it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think it also depends what those rules are.
Well, that's why I started with the infamous stuff, right? Because like if you're breaking rules and you know go on a mass killing spree, you don't necessarily want to be famous for that, right? But you're still breaking breaking law.
It, yeah, I mean, I think I can't recall now, but in the movie it was in relation to like the fines, like the fines for the shoe. 'Cause like yeah, because I know like I think he was referencing the fact that the NBA at the time your shoe had to be at 50%, at least 50% white, and then the shoe, the Jordans were going to be red with the black, and so and instead it was like that was like an infamous like the notoriety from getting fined every game was going to end up contributing to the brand because then like which is funny because like in the end it's sort of like it created again added to this this idea of like this unique figure and this like this rule breaker, this like to Paul's point, like this sort of Steve Jobs or Elon Musk type of person who's transcending the boundaries of what's normal. And then the goals, and then not the goal, but like what ended up happening is you have this brand that becomes so massive, and then everybody is trying to sort of like they're buying it because it's like unique and it's like broken the rules, and he's like gone outside the box. And then so then there's like a rush of everybody trying to, in a sense, look the same by all getting Jordans, right? So it's sort of funny, but it's like a taste of the air up there, if you will, right? It's like by buying it, you sort of have a taste of like, okay, I'm also a rule breaker, even though most people don't fit into those categories, right? These sort of transcendent type figures that are remembered. So I don't know. I was just thinking out loud here. Like it's kind of ironic that, or not ironic. I don't know if irony is the right word, but um, yeah, like this one, these people transcend, and then everyone else tries to kind of ends up looking like the same as everybody else by getting the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. That is really interesting. And the more I think about this, the more I sort of land in the middle. Like I don't know if it's as accurate as it thinks it is, but I think it's also true at the same time. Like part of me, I'm not gonna lie. In some ways, the sentence bothers me because I think it just taps into this like idea that we have to conquer, you have to break the rules and stuff, which I get. And I guess it depends on what the rules are. Like if we're talking about a guy like Sonny or their Nike, like you said, paying the fines, like that's more breaking tradition, or is it? Like maybe it isn't. Maybe what are that's why I say what are the rules, right? Uh,
I mean, you could argue that that was the rule put forth by the NBA, right? That they were breaking. Whether or not that rule is a good rule is up for debate. I think it's dumb, but that's a different discussion for a different time, right? Because I'm not in, Paul 1985 mindset. I don't even think I knew what basketball was at that time. So go ahead.
I think people, especially like Americans, like they love being rebels, right? I mean, in that sense, like it's like maybe it's because American independence or something. But even now, where it's like like obviously like the dominant superpower, but people still tap into that. They like to like even if you're the majority position, like people tend to, especially like Americans, like or North Americans maybe, but like to feel as though like they're rule breakers, like they're rebels, right? I mean, even you saw like obviously with the new, like with Star Wars, it's like okay, Rebel Alliance, like that tapped into like in this, and it's happening in the 70s, right? Where or 70s and 80s, where it's like the people watching are like, yeah, like the rebels, and it was so good that when they made the new movies they're like, let's do it again, because like people, that's what people are interested in seeing, right? That's what people like to feel a part of, is that. So even now I think um I think with like the way culture is now as well, like it's like people like to like you it read that story still resonates of like, yeah, like I'm a rule breaker, I'm a rebel, I'm sticking to the man, if you will, even though like Jordan ends up becoming the man in a sense, right? So but it's still that like that maybe that brand or that marketing, that feeling of like i'm I don't know, I guess I'm not I'm making something more of myself than just the norm.
yeah, I think there's and I love. Like I love that. The
Hmm.
idea of realizing what the box is and whether or not and again like looking at the box and saying this doesn't work, we have to try a new way.
Hmm.
I think I love that type of story. I love that type of story. Just the concept of the way it's phrased, though, it's such a funny thing to me because it just got me wondering, are there instances where it isn't? And again, I guess it just comes down to what those rules are, like the NBA deciding like 80% or 90% of the shoe had to be white, we'd look at that now and say that's idiotic. Of course, we also live on the other side of that broken rule,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think this is one of the wonderful things about generations coming up and seeing like, hey, this is what worked for you isn't reality anymore. It doesn't work. I love those stories. I really do. Was it Chevalier is in theaters now, I think, and it's a story of uh, a black man in the 1800s who was on par with Mozart in his musical abilities, and but then the rules pushing him down and how he has to fight back against it. I thought, again, based on a true story. Love those stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe it's just the fact that the hero is a businessman that I think is so interesting. And I come back to that, it's like gotta crush somebody else in the with the brand, but maybe it isn't. I don't know. I keep honestly, I know I'm not making sense right now, but I'm still trying to process this idea.
I mean, even
Why
as
I
a
think it's
businessman, they painted him as an underdog, anyways,
they
right?
did.
Would they ignore the running side of things, where they're absolutely killing it, making money hand
Mm-hmm.
over fist, but Nike only has 17% of the basketball market, so feel pity for them because they don't have anything here. But they're still a multinational company that can, manufacture shoes globally and get them into the hands of everybody else. But
It's
feel bad for them.
that's fair. It's interesting to compare a film like this to The Founder. You mentioned The Founder
Mm,
earlier
yeah.
because there's a rule breaker, but he's
Yep.
not likable. Like you
No.
like him because he's Michael Keaton, but
Mm.
he's a jerk.
Yep.
um, and a film like this, but he does succeed. Like I forget what his name is now. I forget what his name is.
Ray
Kroc.
Kroc.
Yeah,
Ray
Ray
Kroc.
Kroc.
There you go.
And he succeeds, but he is far less likable.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
because he does it through questionable business practices.
Is that different than them breaking the? I'm not. I love
I
this.
think it
I love
is.
this vision. Is it
I think
different?
people. I mean, ultimately, people like winners, right? I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but like, I mean, these stories that we're talking about, like it's they're the ones that succeeded. I mean, just thinking of with this movie, and they sort of had they had that scene with it was Jason Bateman, right? Uh, and he's sort of alluding to the fact that because Sonny, he really put it all on the line, like, and not just his job, right? It was like, all these other people's jobs at Nike, gambling on this instinct that he had. And then I think it was, yeah, Jason Bateman, they had this scene where he sort of talks about how, like, he has his daughter and he sees her and he brings her Nikes, which I guess is good marketing. But and he's kind of worried that, like, oh, like, if this doesn't work out, this gamble doesn't work out, and so, I mean, like, in that sense, like, I mean, the story, we're only seeing this movie because it did work, because it did work out, right? And so I don't know if, like, the lesson is, hey, just gamble, but like, but it's like, ultimately it's like people like stories when they're like, people like stories of winners, and like, and so that's what it's showing. But it was, but not to sound cynical, like, because I kind of like that. I sort of like that it was this tight little story, specifically about this one. Like, the whole story is just about this one particular deal. It wasn't like, oh, and then how did they then market, Jordan after that, or how did it know? It was just like one very specific narrow story, and it was like, even though you knew the result, it was sort of like, it was like a pleasant winning story of, like you said, Paul, like, they were not, in the grand scheme, they weren't really underdogs, but, like, in the specific market, they were. um and then you come away from it, yeah, you just come away from it feeling like, all right, yeah, you know what were those Jordan ones cost that, like we were talking about before. Yeah. I don't know. No, but you kind of come away from it feeling like, okay, yeah, like, like, and I don't know if the lesson, I don't know if there is a lesson, is like, oh, gamble, gamble your whole
Put your house
department
on the line.
on a bet. But just, yeah, just that idea of, like, following, I don't know, maybe following through on, like, when, like, you have this strong bet, and figuring out a way to make it work, right? Like, he was very resourceful, you could say, in terms of figuring out how to get it across the finish line.
I think the businessy term is calculated risk.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed like an individual to me that took a lot of analysis in his risky plays, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Sonny or
lot
Phil
of
Knight?
background. Sonny, yeah, Sonny. Definitely not Phil Knight.
It's interesting. Like Johan, you said people like winners, and this movie might not have been made if it went wrong. Well, probably likely because the cool factor here is Jordan, of course. But a film that isn't out yet that I've seen is Blackberry, which
Oh,
is
right. Okay.
coming out in a couple of weeks, and that is a fascinating film. Again, about a brand. It's about a
Yeah.
brand again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny.
A
But a
rise
Canadian brand.
Canadian brand, global. It was global Canadian brand.
I mean, it was.
For see, rise and fall.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
the rise and the fall of it. And again, it starts off they're rebels and rule breakers, and by the end
Mm-hmm.
they've broken the wrong rules. And it's really interesting to me to watch to compare the two. In my head, I'm comparing the two stories. And
Mm.
I love, and like you, Jahan, I love that this is focused on one deal. Like this is focused on a deal that everybody loves. Like everybody loves the Jordan brand. Everybody loves, everybody knows Nike because of this deal. So there's a certain pop and fun just to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is interesting. Go ahead.
It was just thinking back to like kind of like, yeah, Paul, you mentioned like I mean at the time too, like even though he like he was known somewhat, right? But obviously like he wasn't, you know, um he wasn't the one we know him as now. And so like I like the North Carolina scenes too, just like when
Mm.
he, I mean, aside from that, that sort of showed like Sonny, okay, he's willing to cross the agent. By the way, like like the agent David Falk, right? I can't remember who the actor was who played
Yep.
him, but another excellent character, just like all like I mean, again, I it's there was a ton of star power, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but like a lot of the scenes pop because like whoever, whatever screen time they had, they sort of made use of it. But I enjoyed that character. But anyway, him going to North Carolina and just showing again like that sort of you don't really think of like Jordan. I don't know, you don't really think of him in his like his at one point
Humble beginnings.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like at one point he's this guy, he's this kid from, North Carolina, and he's just, lives in this home, and like but it's he's nobody knows he's going to become this, billionaire athlete, and sort of transcendent sports figure, right? And then and brand and business figure as well, right? So yeah, I enjoyed seeing that, like those scenes as well with the North
I mean, if you
Carolina
listen to
thing.
his mom did.
I was gonna say his mom, Viola Davis, knew.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
Sonny, I mean, it was good. It was a good pitch, but like, yeah, I like that line. Or he's like, you and I are the only, something like, you and I are the only ones on the planet, or something like that, who know like that your son is gonna be, as great as he's gonna become, kind of thing. And it was, I'm sure that's what, a mother wants to hear. She played it cool, but like, that was good. That was good. Good selling.
so David Falk was Chris Messina.
Right, Chris Messina,
He
yeah, yeah,
he was also in Argo, actually, oddly enough.
yeah. He was great.
Messina's done a lot. He's in a
Yeah,
lot
he
of things.
has.
Well, the intensity was good.
I was thinking with the Affleck reference with Argo.
Probably Matt Damon is in Argo somewhere. He's just sort of walking around in the back.
He's one of the food vendors in the
He's
background.
he's doing catering.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Steve, you sort of alluded to, it's like a, I mean, ultimately it's like a business story in a sense, right? So did you find yourself kind of as you were watching it, and maybe you Paul as well, like kind of like aware of like okay, ultimately this is just like a story about like, these people, like this business, or were you, or did they do a good enough job of, you weren't really thinking of like, okay, ultimately this is about like selling, shoes, and did it feel like something more as a story, or did it, you know what I mean, like, or was it, would you find yourself kind of keep drawing back to like, okay, the hero is a businessman or something?
it's not that it bothered me. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't want to say that it necessarily bothered me, but it's like I watched it and I was into it. Like I knew
Mhm.
what it was. And that's part of it. Like part of it
Yeah.
is honestly it's a nostalgic film.
Mhm.
Because I know the brand. I can't say I've worn the brand, but I wear the Nike. Um, but with Tetris, it was the same sort of experience. I was into it because I was interested in the story because I already know, like you said, I know the ending,
Mhm.
but I was intrigued about how I get there. I'm telling you, it was this article that made me realize it's so fascinating to me now how many films we're getting right now that are reinforcing the story of brands that we all know.
Mhm.
And it's not the story of it's not using them. That's why I think it's different than the Lego movie. The Lego movie was interesting because somehow it was a commercial for Lego and like undercutting it at the same time. It was a really
Mhm.
interesting mix. Um, the Mario movie is a straight up commercial for Mario. Fine, I'm fine with all of this. Like I'm a Disney fan, so obviously I'm used to and fine with this. I just I found it so interesting. It didn't take me out of it. I found myself, I'm rooting for Sonny. I'm rooting for Nike to sign him, even though I know they inevitably do, right? Like
Mhm.
I was on the journey. I was into it and having a blast. Um, but there's just something it's so funny because I know they're totally different films, so bear with me, but hold this up to like The Big Short where normally when you see a film and business is involved, the villain is the businessman.
Mhm.
And we're getting films now where the innovators are taking down the business industry and making themselves more money because they're the innovators. I just find that fascinating.
Mhm.
Like I said, it didn't bother me. I didn't come out of there feeling icky. It just was such a unique experience to me that this is what we've been getting a lot in the last few years.
Yeah. Maybe
I
that
mean,
go.
I'm still waiting for the Walmart movie.
Oh man,
Fair.
they
Sam,
cannot come out looking good in that.
old Sammy. But maybe that goes back to again, like the idea that even though this is focused on a win, but they allude to the potential consequences of the failure because um, some of these businesses that we sort of take for granted or they've just been in our lives, um, and they're just sort of legacy corporations. But they were all started at some point, and it was a gamble, and there was no guarantee of it succeeding. And so then, um, whatever, you know, like obviously there's a lot of good that comes from business and industry and employees and like it's not like I know it's like oh corporations are bad kind of thing, but right now is the current climate. But like but in terms of like actual like the positive uh economic impact and then life impact of having of the various businesses they don't materialize out of nothing, I guess, right? It is like these in a way like some of these brands they start off with these kind of innovators, and so it'll be interesting to see if maybe I don't know, maybe there'll be some young upstart who'll find it inspiring or something to kind of take that risk, you know what I mean? Instead of just sort of like, well, there's no point in me bothering or something. I don't
I heard Phil Knight used Glengarry Glen Ross for this movie.
know.
Was it our friend or my friend that Paul and I saw the film with came out of it and he said Phil Knight had to influence that finale, and I
Mm.
was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "They made him look like an idiot, and the only detail they gave about him is how much he gave to charity." So, which you know what? To your point, though, again, Jahan, just going back to that, it's funny. And again, I don't want to make a bigger deal about this. Maybe it's not a big deal at all. They make Nike seem like like they're third place in the shoe industry, but they were making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Like they were a massive corporation, and they make them seem like nothing because you focused in on the nothing part of the
Mhm.
corporation. But Nike was already they were a multi-billion-dollar corporation on their own again. Before that, I just think it's
I
interesting.
think they allude to they had gone public or something.
Yes.
And then yes, and Phil Knight is responsible for the shareholders and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, in '84 they went from making 40.7 million to 2.5 billion with a B in the year before.
All
Jeez.
those poor underdogs.
Yep.
I just think it's a fascinating way to tell your story. That's it. I like um because could this story be told from another person's perspective in the same area? I don't know. Maybe not. Not that it needs to be. I told it beautifully, told the film beautifully. I loved it. It's a blast.
Do you think, go back to where you started at in terms of talking about like Damon versus Affleck and just how, Damon is sort of, more regarded as the better actor in a way, right? And I think we were saying like I can't remember if it was you or Paul, but like we didn't necessarily care too much for Affleck's performances in general, but like it's interesting that Affleck is, now he's a pretty well regarded director. I mean, not just now. I mean, he won the Oscar, or I don't think he won the director Oscar, but
No, he didn't. He didn't win.
Argo,
Argo
but
won, but he
yeah,
didn't get nominated.
his film won, right? So I mean, it's not like he's like it's the first time he's he's produced a good he's directed a good movie. But do you think there's something in that, like in terms of like why he he's not maybe at the level of an actor as Damon, but then do you think there's something about that allows him to maybe translate over into a director? Like there's whatever he's maybe not fully in that prevents him from fully giving himself into a role like the way Damon does, where like Paul was noticing that for him, like you mentioned you were noticing, oh, this is Ben Affleck.
Mhm.
Uh, does that whatever it is allow him to maybe take himself out and craft these stories so well?
I Paul, do you want to answer that?
I have no idea, to be honest. I haven't contemplated it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
I
it's
just
not
think
something that's come up for me, to be honest. I don't know.
Paul doesn't lie awake at night thinking of Ben Affleck's career. I do. Ever since he married J Lo, I just don't care. Um,
Wow.
I just
So
think
like,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm just making another side comment. Continue with your thought.
I just think that he's taking different roles. I which is ironic because I say him trying to. I felt like he was forcing, or maybe Hollywood was forcing him, but trying to make him cooler than he is. And the irony is, he was Batman,
Mhm.
but he was a good Batman, and I don't. And I felt like now again he's had all sorts of personal problems from what we've heard and all these things going on behind the scenes even during the Batman years. But like even as Batman, he seemed more relaxed than he did when he was younger. Like I'm not saying everything he does is brilliant now or anything, but I think there's something behind this. Like he's certainly got a good eye behind the camera. Um, some of I think the films he's directed have been far better than the ones he's just been in, just personally, and that may or
Mhm.
may not be related. It's just how I feel about those films. I just feel like he looks more present on screen. He's just like even this role. I know he's playing Phil Knight as kind of a goof, um, but he didn't look like he was trying to do too much. And I think young Ben Affleck looked like that a lot. And it wasn't working for him. It'd be interesting to me to see like a Matt Damon directed film that he's in,
Mhm.
like, reverse them because I know they're buddies, and of the two of them, Damon has had the more stable lifestyle, or seems to have had the more stable lifestyle and career. Um, but I really think it's when he stepped behind the camera that he just got more comfortable in front of it. It's really interesting to see that change.
And maybe it is the success too, right? Like the success from stepping behind the camera and being able to produce these, like especially after like his sort of downturn, that
Mm.
then now that's why he's in like a better place, right? And then we sort of touched on how like America or like or not just America, but like people love success, and then we also love success in fall. And then the other thing is success fall redemption, right? Like it's
Yep.
the other. classic arc that people like, and so in that sense, it's kind of neat seeing him thrive now and making these movies.
I mean, taking it a step further, he is getting older. There's a level of maturity that comes with that at time, right? And that could just change his perspective on things. More comfortable in his own skin because he's been in behind the camera and in front of the camera for longer now. I don't know, something to be said. I don't think that's something not to consider or to overlook, I guess.
It's probably a good place for us to wrap this up, guys. This has been fun, but we should screen it or skip it. Air, screen it or skip it.
Stream it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I wouldn't go. I
What are
wouldn't
the
see
options?
Well,
stream it or
skip it, but there's also stream it as if you don't want to say
Yeah.
theater. There's that too.
I wouldn't go to the theaters for this again. Good
Yeah,
movie, great film. It's not worth your theater money. See it at home on Netflix or Amazon or whatever it's going to stream on. Probably Amazon because it was an Amazon movie. But stream it. It's a good movie. It's not worth going to theater for. You don't need those seats or that experience for this movie to enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think it's there's worse movies that you should see in theaters because, like, to Paul's point, they're theater movies. There are movies that are, you know, not as tight stories, worse editing, more shameless. That it's
Yep.
still worth seeing in theaters just because of the theater experience. So yeah, it's like a good movie that I agree. Stream it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we need to see it in IMAX.
Yeah.
I need to see giant Ben Affleck on the
with
Listen,
the D
Steve,
box.
I know you're getting a little older. But
D-box.
you don't need the bigger screen just to see movies like this.
I need D-box seats for those business meetings. That's what I need. I need to feel like I'm there. No, I'm with you guys. It's to stream it. I think it is coming on Amazon. I think in May, and it's great. Like, it's a really good film. It's well written, well executed. But I mean, yeah, you don't have to go see it in theaters. It's fine.
It's a talkie. You're not going to get much action out of it. The big screen isn't going to do anything better.
I'm sorry.
What?
It's a talkie?
Yeah, you haven't heard of that?
It's Grandpa.
Like, it's a movie focused more on dialogue than action scenes.
Yes, no, I understood what you meant. I just thought it was
okay.
funny to use that phrase. It's
an oldie but a goodie.
Oh, this was guys. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, that was fun.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, that was great.
Anytime.
Just felt like I was just talking to a couple friends. Yeah.
Not me. This call for. I'm so glad.
Funny how that worked.
That's funny.
For you at home, a reminder: you can find us wherever podcasts are available, and of course, you can find us on YouTube, which you can like and subscribe. Smash that subscribe button. I always feel stupid when I say that, but you can find us on YouTube, and on both streams, you will find great conversations like this, as well as fantastic interviews with industry professionals of current and past projects and films. You can also go to the website, screenfish.net, look at the podcast page. You can download Fishing for More. Some small group questions help you get the conversation started where you are. I think and I hope that we are back next week. This is episode 196, and we are getting there, getting close to 200. So I think we are back next week to talk about Renfield. But again, guys,
still need to see that.
It is something. But again, thank you guys, and for you at home, we started the conversation. This was